All right, so an official good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, or bună dimineața, bună ziua, bună seara tuturor. Hi, my name is Madalina Meiroshu, and I will start us off by introducing Ilana Costea, who will then take us into the program. So if you would allow me to just tell you a few words about Professor Costea. So Professor Costea is a retired full professor of automation engineering from California State University, Northridge, where she worked 37 years. She has a master's degree in architecture from the Institute of Architecture of Urban Planning Ion Mincu in Bucharest, Romania, and a Master of Art in Industrial Design from the University of California at Los Angeles, and a doctorate in design analysis from UCLA. And she has been the chair of the Manufacturing Systems and Management Department at CSUN. She has been active in leadership positions with many organizations like National Computer Graphics Organization, Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineering, Man Systems and Cybernetics Society, excuse me, American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics, Society of Manufacturing Engineering, American Romanian Academy of Arts and Sciences, ARA. We know her in this particular role the best, and Viitorul Roman Society, so the Romanian Society in Los Angeles, California. Her greatest passion is Romanian culture and promoting Romanian culture. She has created several Wikipedia pages, website, videos, YouTubes, have published numerous papers and book chapters, organized sessions, made presentations at conferences in the fields of computer graphics, computer-aided design, manufacturing, artificial intelligence, and art. And since 1998, she has published articles on her self-imposed mission of discovering Romanian cultural presence abroad in various Romanian magazines and journals. And among others, in 2015, she published the first volume of her articles, Exerciții de Neuitare, and there is a second volume coming up.
We are not hearing you.
You're not hearing me?
You're breaking up.
I'm breaking up?
Yeah.
You're okay now.
Okay. So Exerciții de Neuitare, the first volume is already out, has been out since 2015, and the second one is coming really soon. And another thing that I would like to mention here is her work with the American artist Jerry McDaniel. She published the book Obama, the First 40 Plus Days, and then, of course, a project on Ana Blandiana. So this is just a very small selection of the amazing activity of Professor Ilana Costea, whom I have the honor of introducing to you, and I would like to give her the virtual microphone. And in the meantime, I would like you all to please remain on mute if you are not speaking. Thank you very much, and a virtual applause for Ilana Costea.
Thank you very much. First of all, Madalina, you are doing this better than me. You are remembering things about me better than I do. So thank you very much. I should stand, you know. It is very nice the way you introduced me. And yes, I organized an ARA conference so that you know how far back my ARA activities go. In 1992 at California State University, Northridge, when the president of ARA was Maria Manoliu Mana. She's a very famous linguist. I want to welcome everybody here, and I want to tell you just the fact that this is the 6th ARA Zoom 2021, and we have started with a very large number in the audience when we had in March 2021 a meeting session with Ana and about Ana Blandiana, and we decided that we also want to have smaller groups on very precise, limited sort of specific themes. So today we have this kind of group where we want to also have a sharing between the the presenters, because they are specialists in that particular field. We had a small group also for the 5th event, which was on Istro-Romanian. So I think that today it's going to be a very exciting meeting where the presenters will share information about Hortensia Papadat Bengescu, if I may say, the Romanian Virginia Woolf, but she's a very complex personality and a very gifted writer. So I will start to introduce somebody whom I invited yesterday. We have with us Dorian Brana, the director of the Romanian Cultural Institute in New York. He is in a meeting, in a gala on the East Coast, and he sneaked out the meeting to be with us for a few seconds. So would you please say something, and then we'll let you go. Before you start, Mr. Brana, I want to say that the reason for me inviting him is, number one, because I appreciate so much what the Romanian Cultural Institute does in New York, and secondly, because he has supported our meetings by putting the information about our meetings on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you so much. And now you have the floor.
So I hope you can hear me now. Thank you, Professor Costea. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Indeed, I'm at the gala, not only the gala, but the Alianza events in Washington, D.C. I'm in a short break, but I was very keen to join this event, this conference, and congratulate the organizer, the organizers, thank everyone for participating, and telling all of the participants and organizers that we are very proud to have been contributed modestly to the success of this Zoom conference. We have been very receptive all the time to the requests of all Romanian American organizations, or Romanian organizations for that matter, when it came to conferences or any type of events. We will continue to support these kind of initiatives, and we are very much welcome them. United States is a big country, obviously, and in order for the Romanian culture, Romanian personalities, or Romanian great figures of Romanian culture to become truly visible, it is important to work together. The action of the diplomatic missions, the cultural institutes, the Romanian state per se, is not sufficient. We need to work together, and at least this is our philosophy. We will continue to support initiatives coming from the academia, coming from the civic sector, coming from the independent cultural sector, because only in this way, by putting our resources together, by working together, by putting ideas and initiatives at work in partnership, we can achieve that visibility, that impact that Romanian personalities, artifacts, cultural figures deserve so much. And I would believe that this event, dedicated to one of the biggest Romanian writers, who happens to be a female writer, deserves a special praise, because it brings the light to a probably much less known part of Romanian culture and Romanian literature, to an author that unfortunately is not studied or read as much as she would deserve. But it's still a very important name. It's still a literature that can speak to our worlds and to our problems and to our mentalities. And I think it's a fantastic avenue to Romanian culture as a whole. So I'd like to congratulate once more the organizers. Thank you, Professor Costea. Thank you, Professor Orlik. Thank you, all other partners in the United States and America for this very timely event and conference. And just to assure you that we will be here to support these kind of events in the future as well. I'm looking forward to have them in person very soon. And probably I'm very, for sure, I'm very eager to invite you at the Institute in New York City to have these kind of conferences, debates, dialogues about important themes and personalities in our culture at the Romanian Cultural Institute in New York. Congratulations, and may this conference be the beginning of a string of conferences that will illuminate important parts of our culture. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for a beautiful speech, and also for being able to get out of Alianța for a short while to be with us. And please do visit.
I thought it was very important. It's the seminar leg of the Alianța event. They are talking about very important topics like visa waiver, which is of course crucial for the life of the Romanian-American community here in the United States. But I thought Hortensia Papadat Bengescu would merit, a little time, and I was very, very keen to at least to say a few words to greet everybody who's participating in this conference, because I think apart from the political topics, apart from the political diplomatic themes, these cultural exchanges and these cultural conversations are also crucial.
Thank you so much. And please, all of you, if you find yourself in New York, do not hesitate to look at the schedule of the events. There are very many events. They are doing wonderful things. I remember having seen an exhibition at the Guggenheim on Brâncuș, which was in partnership with the Romanian Cultural Institute. I also was at the Cultural Institute when I found myself in New York for a beautiful event on music. They have a nice hall, and they have a nice leader and a very effective and enthusiastic leader in Dorian Brana.
You shower me with praises that are of course much undeserved. But if you are today in New York, tonight in New York, we have an opening of Dumitru Gorzo's exhibition, one of the most important contemporary Romanian artists. So if you are tonight in New York, join in a very interesting event. But apart from that, just befriend us on Facebook, on other social media accounts, because we produce a lot of online content, as we are very much converted to the idea of hybrid cultural diplomacy.
Thank you very much, and thank you again for putting our events on your Facebook and Twitter. It's very important
Anytime.
for us. And let's spread the information about the beautiful values, cultural values of Romania among other people who are non-Romanians and who know less about our culture, the American society, and the world in general. And also, thank you for saying that Hortensia Papadat Bengescu, the subject, the theme of today's meeting, she's not very well known. And one of the things that I liked to do in these Zoom sessions was bring to the knowledge of even Romanians some people who are forgotten and they deserve to be known. Like, for instance, we had a session on Smaranda Brăescu, an aviator, skydiver, and pilot, about whom very few people, even very few Romanians, know about. She was also a very emancipated woman. And then we did something also not known by many Romanians, the Istro-Romanian. So we try to pick subjects which are famous knowledge like Ana Blandiana, but also topics which raise the alerts the Romanians to people who are forgotten, personalities who are forgotten and have to be brought up to the knowledge of any Romanian and any person in the field or in the United States or in the world. And thank you very much. Enjoy the Alianza. I think it's a very important organization. And I'm going to now give the floor to the General Counsel of Romania in Los Angeles, Dr. Cosmin Dumitrescu. I let Dr. Dorian Brana talk before you, Dr. Dumitrescu, because Dr. Dumitrescu is one of ours. He has been to all the Zoom sessions, all the 6, including this one, Zoom sessions of ARA in 2021. Dr. Cosmin Dumitrescu is, I'm convinced, the best counsel that we had in Los Angeles. And he is the best counsel for reasons which are special. He, number one, participates very actively, tries to participate at almost all the activities, the Romanian activities or activities which are led, organized by Romanians. There was a beautiful conference, one-day conference in Palos Verdes, organized by Aura Imbaruș, and it was not a Romanian event, but Aura Imbaruș is Romanian, and she was one of the moderator and organizer there, and Dr. Cosmin Dumitrescu was present. And what is very interesting about when he starts talking is that he talks addressing very well that particular topic. And let me give you an example. This event organized by Aura Imbaruș, which was about empowering women, he said, you probably don't know, today is the International Day of Respect. It's a very important day because we are giving respect to women. So he always finds these special details to tell the audience about the event. And Dr. Cosmin Dumitrescu is present at all the community events, but present with really that means making presentations with a meaning. And I thank you very much for being our counsel, and thank you very much for supporting the Zoom events of ARA. You have the floor, Dr. Cosmin Dumitrescu.
Thank you, Professor Costa. Good morning, everybody. I hope that everybody can hear me. Is it working? Just make a confirmation. So let me first congratulate ARA and all the organizers that put together this beautiful conference. Also, let me greet and send my salute to all our friends on the East Coast or in Europe, because I see that we have participants from London. It's a great pleasure to see my friend Doru Brana participating with us. Hello, Doru. Thank you for your nice words and for your nice introduction. I'm so very sorry that I couldn't attend the Alianza event this year, and maybe you know that I have just recovered from COVID-19, so that impeded me to travel to Washington, D.C. But I spoke to Ambassador Rosapep with our friend Jim, and he understood that. However, please send my greetings to all our friends in Alianza there, together with my regrets that I couldn't attend this year. We are all friends. Coming back to today's conference on Hortensia Papadat Bengescu, let me congratulate you again, ARA and Professor Costa and all the organizers, and to congratulate you to having here with us Professor Orlic, who is one of the best specialists in the world about the opera, about the work of Hortensia Papadat Bengescu. And if you reminded us of little details that I usually bring in our conversation or in my speech each and every day when I'm doing that, let me remind you that today is the International Day of Men, and it's very interesting having this wonderful idea of bringing Hortensia Papadat Bengescu in analyzing in our conference of today, being well known that Hortensia Papadat Bengescu is one of the best promoters of women personalities and characters in her work at the day Everybody talks about Virginia Woolf. Virginia Woolf was way behind Hortensia Papadat Bengescu. Bringing into discussion Hortensia Papadat Bengescu in exactly in the International Day of Man, that's a wonderful idea, because it shows how Romanians put together and feel policies of gender equality. And let me remind you that Romania is one of the best promoters of gender equality. Romania has the best policies in Europe for that kind of subject. I'm giving you the example of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and of the Diplomatic Corps of Romania, where, for example, at Bucharest, more than 54% of the managing position in a Ministry of Foreign Affairs are women. And that's a thing, because diplomacy used to be a men's world. This is how Romania acts in that respect, and that should be underlined here. In the same time, I would like to underline the fact that all diplomatic missions of Romania, embassies, consulates, or the cultural institutes, support the promotion of the Romanian culture in the United States, that being a part of our highest priority. You all know that the strategic partnership between Romania and the United States of America has more dimensions, and that the academic cultural dimension of the partnership is of utmost importance. And everything that you are doing by yourself, with our support, together with us, for promoting Romanian culture, puts a very important brick to that wall of trust and cooperation between Romania and the United States in the cultural field. And I thank you for that. And I can tell you that the Consulate General of Romania in Los Angeles, as the only mission of Romania in the West US, is going to be with you each and every time when you're doing that, and is going to bring you in our project each and every time that we are doing, because only together, as Doru Brana said, can have the best results. I am looking forward to hear the comments and the synthesis and analysis of the work of Hortensia Papadat Bengescu that our specialists today are going to do. I'm not going to dive into that. Professor Orlich knows that I'm a great fan of Hortensia Papadat Bengescu, but I'm not going to make comments on the literature and her work. I'm going to let you, dear friends and specialists, to do that. I'm going to be here listening to each and every word. And again, congratulations for the conference, and congratulations for the idea of organizing it for the International Day of Men. And happy International Day of Men for everybody.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cosmin Dumitrescu. First of all, thank you all men who are here. We have some men with us, and that's wonderful. But I would like, since you and you, Dr. Cosmin Dumitrescu, and Dorian Brana are with us, I would like you to spend one very brief moment, so that we don't take too much from the conference itself, to tell us about the Alianza, because I'm not sure that everybody knows what Alianza is. So which one of you wants to tell us something?
To try to do that, as I think that I know Alianza for quite a long time now. Alianza is a wonderful organization that was founded by the former ambassadors, US ambassadors in Romania. So practically it reunites all the US ambassadors in Romania, former and of course current, and they are trying to bring synergies to all chapters of cooperation between Romania and the United States. They are the best promoter, U.S. promoter of Romania image here in the United States. They have a vibrant activity of cooperation in the most important strategic fields of cooperation between Romania and the United States. And this event that they usually organize during October, November each and every year, a gala and also a summit with very interesting panels, are practically making a synthesis of the activity of that year. They are very active. They organize a lot of conferences of this kind that we are doing right now. And they are bringing they are enhancing the image and the influence of many Romanian personalities here in the United States and American personalities in Romania. They are great diplomats, they are statesmen, they are members of the Congress, they are members of the state congresses and so on. And they are really the best friends of Romanians and of Romania here in the United States. And the ambassador James Rosapep, a great friend of mine and of Romania, is currently its president. Please, Doru, if you wish to add some other details.
Maybe you can tell us what is specific about the gala today, because there is this gala, and I understand that every year the gala takes place, and it's a very interesting and event, and also they make some awards. And I know that the first award, which was given by Alianța, was given to one of us, to Ilana Orlic. So Ilana, congratulations for being the first to get this Alianța award. And so if you want to add something about what's taking place now, that would be great.
Not very much to add, because Cosmin has described very aptly the creation and the mission of Alianța. Just to tell you that an event like yours could easily have fit in the series of panels of Alianța. Of course, I'm exaggerating a bit, just to point out that culture is very important for Alianța, which is an umbrella organization bringing together, as Cosmin said, all the Romanian-American efforts on every level, from the diplomatic level, academic level, economic level. So you can find here top diplomats, but also very important business persons, and also important cultural personalities, cultural figures. And it has usually this summit event, this annual event has two legs. One is the gala where some of the greatest Romanian Americans or Americans who have contributed to advancing Romanian interest in the United States are celebrated and rewarded with prizes, and one leg devoted to important topics, and always the education or the academic life or academic exchanges are part of these panels. I want to say, and with this, I think it's more important to talk about Hortensia Papadat Bengescu. I was supposed to lead a panel on education, and one of the speakers, distinguished Professor Orlic, was supposed to be one of the speakers and panelists, but unfortunately, due to all this the pandemic situation, and I wish Cosmin a speedy recovery. But you look great, Cosmin. So always energetic and
already out of the woods. Already out of the woods. So it's,
I can tell, and I'm very happy. Sorry we couldn't meet in Washington. So Professor Orlic was supposed to give a speech, but unfortunately the educational panel was cancelled because of the pandemic. So this is Alianța. You are most welcome to participate both in the gala and in the panels, and maybe in the future we'll have a panel where some of your guests will be part of this conversation that is very much enhanced and stimulated by an organization like Alianța.
Let me add one thing, Professor. Thank you, Doru. For example, today's the gala of this year celebrated and recognized the activity of two great entrepreneurs from Romania that own the well-known company Bitdefender. And Talbesh family. And they also are not only a model for business, but also a model for charity, a model for humanitarian activities and so on. So they are really great. And these kind of events as Alianța Gala are pointing out that there are Romanians in the world and Americans in the world that are really great. And they are doing great things for humanity. They are doing great things for Romania, for America, and for the world. And we are really grateful to Alianța for doing that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, what I think is very special about Alianța is that Rosa Pepe and Mark Gittenstein, who were the ambassadors in Romania, they are not Romanians and they fell in love with our country. I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, Rosa Pepe, when he returned after being an ambassador of the United States in America, he brought what I heard, he brought a wooden carved gate from Maramureș. So these people are non-Romanians who appreciate Romanians, who appreciate Romania, who appreciate our values. And I understand that Mark Gittenstein, who was also very influential in Alianța, has gotten now an important position at the European Union, right?
Yes, but allow me to complete you, not correct, but to complete your words. Mark Gittenstein is one of the founder of Alianța, but also he's somehow Romanian because he has Romanian origins. His family comes from there. And also, for example, Ambassador Hans Klem has Romanian origins with her family. So we can find beautiful common points with US ambassadors that represented this great country to our country. So they are not Romanians, they are Americans, but they are many of them of Romanian origins. And that's maybe they are so close to our Romanian spirit.
Well, I congratulate them for being Romanians to the bitter end. So that's wonderful. Thank you very much for your...
great. I mean, they are a couple of meters away, and I think if I insist a little bit, I could have both of them participating in this meeting. But I don't know about the physical door. But I'm sure that Alianța is a great and wide open door for Romanian interests, for Romanian culture, for Romanian spirituality to get into to the United States and to dissipate among American people.
Well, let me challenge you. If you can grab them and bring them here, we will, in a break, we will be very happy to let them tell us something because that's a very special occasion.
I'll do my best. I'll do my best.
But if you can't, we understand. They must be very with that, sorry, Madalina and Ilana, for taking so much time, but I think this brings a lot to our conference, to our symposium, and we have these people who are with us, and I thought that it's very important to hear their view on Alianța and on the team, Hortensia Papadat Bengescu. Now, before we start, I want to say a big thank you to both Ilana and Madalina, and I will say a big thank to Madalina because she was really the hard-working part of this organization of the symposium. Madalina, you were wonderful, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart. With that, I'm going to give the floor to Madalina, who will moderate part of the session, and then Ilana will moderate the other part of the session. We'll have also a little surprise at the end with a poem, which will be recited by someone who is very gifted as an actress. But I'd like you all, if you can stay until the bitter end and be with us, I'm going to let you all introduce yourself because we have some other important people here and they can say a few words, okay? But that will be at the very end. Thank you, and Madalina, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. And First of all, thank you for the kind words. I'm not sure that I deserve them. I think it was a team effort, and it was a pleasure and an honor to work with you and to work with you for this particular purpose, making Hortensia Papadat Bengescu's work known, and perhaps starting a revival of Hortensia Papadat Bengescu. This is our goal, right? So I would like to start our session of presentations, and I would like to remind everybody that all the presentations are going to go on for 15 minutes. So we have 15 minutes for each presentation, and I would like to ask the audience to kindly reserve their questions to the end of all the presentations. So we will have the presentations one after the other, then we will have the poetry reading, and then we'll have the questions. I will let the presenters know 3 minutes before their time is running out via chat that they only have 3 more minutes left. And I hope that that will work as an organizational principle of this. So let's start off. And I would like to introduce Ilana Orlic. And I was thinking that no words will be enough to just capture all of the contributions of Ilana Orlic to all sorts of different kinds of ways in which Romanian culture has been promoted, both in communities in Arizona, and her dedication over decades of just promoting Romanian culture in Arizona and around the Phoenix area, and the wonderful mentorship and time that she has taken as a professor at the Arizona State University. But let me just do a tiny fragment of presentation. So Ilana Orlic is a director of Romanian Studies and professor of comparative literature in the School of International Letters and Cultures at Arizona State University. She also directs the Central European Cultural Collaborative, which is really important, and the European Studies Certificate. She is the author of translations from Romanian fiction and Spanish and Russian theater. She wrote stage adaptations in English and French for performances in Romania, France, and the US, and published numerous scholarly articles. There's too many to read about here, but her monographs include Subversive Stages, Theater in Pre- and Post-Communist Hungary, Romania, and Bulgaria, Myth and Modernity in the 20th Century Romanian Novel, Articulating Gender, Narrating the Nation, Allegorical Femininity in Romanian Fiction, and this definitely is related to our session today. Silent Bodies, Rediscovering the Women of Romanian Short Fiction, again, extraordinarily important for today. And since 2000, Orlic has served as Honorary Consul General of Romania in Arizona. None of this says anything about the kindness and the supportiveness of Ilana Orlic. So it is just my honor and pleasure to introduce to you a mentor, and if I may say so, a friend, Ilana Orlic.
Thank you, Madalina. How can I live up to this? I mean, thank you. This is very gracious and very generous. Everything that was mentioned would not have been possible without the great support, not only support, but also guidance and leadership of numerous friends, scholars, diplomats from Romania. And I don't want to take too much time from my presentation, but I want to thank Professor Ilana Costa for spearheading, masterminding all these incredible events that bring to the forefront Romanian culture, that make Romania an important and significant presence in today's world. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I also want to thank Madalina Meiroshu, but more about that later. Certainly, it is very, very important to mention Consul General Cosmin Dumitrescu. I'm not sure he's still here, and I'm sorry to hear that he has had COVID. I didn't realize that. I hope he gets well fast. As Professor Costa mentioned, Consul General Cosmin Dumitrescu is an amazing presence. It is because of him that we had a wonderful lecturer in our program at Arizona State University, Professor Ionuț Jana, who just led a very interesting panel a few weeks ago on Eastro-Romanian. We've had Professor Jana in our program thanks to Cosmin Dumitrescu, so we are very, very grateful to him. I also want to mention Dorian Brana, who has been a recent but very significant friend. I met him briefly in New York, and I was absolutely amazed at how inviting and welcoming he was about all things Romanian, everything that has to do with Romanian culture. So thank you so much, Dorian Brana, and I look forward to hosting you in Arizona at the university in our cultural collaborative. So there are also amazing people in the audience today. So I could never end the list of acknowledgements and praise. But let me quickly say that I see here Sean Cotter, who is just an amazing translator. I don't know, I don't think he can be seen, but he recently translated into English Crai de Curtea Veche, Rakes of the Old Court. And so this is quite an event. And Sean, in relation to my presentation today, asked me a few years ago to send a few copies. You are very welcome, Sean, thank you. He asked me to send him a few copies of the Disheveled Maidens, and I was very, very flattered about the translation. Let me say this. Each 10 years, a translation needs revision. I am not a translator. I only translated the Halipa trilogy because I wanted to show my students, graduate students in comparative literature, English literature, cultural studies, I wanted to show them what a great novelist Hortensia Papadat Bengescu is, and what a star in that constellation of extraordinary 20th century novelists. And I couldn't just say she's great. I mean, I could, but that wouldn't take me very far. So I used my Fulbright year in 2006, 2007. I used my Fulbright year to translate the Halipa trilogy. I was in Bucharest and in Cluj. And so by reviewing the translations, I can tell you, I would have done things probably differently today, but for immediate purposes, I could use the texts to show my students exactly what I'm talking about. And actually, Shannon Ditto, who is here today, she's a remarkable, outstanding young scholar. She's one of my doctoral advisees, and she's one of the people who could benefit from the reading. So I just wanted to show that the presence of the translation is important in that respect. As far as today goes, today's presentation, I know that there is so much going on in terms of younger scholars, Professor Meirosu and Shannon Ditto, who are interested in the feminist gender studies, sexuality aspects of Papadat Bengescu's narratives. So I really wanted to focus on the city, on the urban space, just because in that regard as well, Hortensia Papadat Bengescu is an amazing writer. As a parenthesis, you are going to see in the background a scenery from Kobilița. This is a little place in Romania. That's because the Romanians in Phoenix just had their festival last weekend. And I was desperate to bring a little patch of Romania into the screen. So I think I'm going to keep it because it does remind me of Romania. Of course, it's nothing to do with the urban landscape, but nevertheless, this is the connectivity. So let me get started here with the fact that in Papadat Bengescu's Disheveled Maidens, women who give in to their sexual passions and who move away from traditional environments, which in this case is the agricultural society of Romania, embrace city life in order to become agents of social change in the city's fashionable new moral and urban geography. It is somewhat disconcerting to know to hear that occasionally people are confused. Budapest, Bucharest, and this is something that does not make me very happy. Bucharest is such a beautiful city. And so I want to bring that into the foreground. And I know that I'm preaching to the choir, but nevertheless, it is important to underline in the connection of Virginia Woolf, Mrs. Dalloway, and Papadat Bengescu, the Disheveled Maidens, that the prominence of London and its parks and its homes and its elegance and its receptions certainly are all matched in Papadat Bengescu's trilogy. You find the beauty of the city landscape in both the Disheveled Maidens and The Hidden Way, which is the third novel of the trilogy, Drumul Ascuns. You also find the elegant homes and the extraordinary events that occur in these homes in the concert of Bach music. And there is a recent translation coming up of the concert of Bach music. And I think that Gabi is somewhere here. And that should be a very interesting moment. So again, Virginia Woolf, Papadat Bengescu, in terms of the city life, London vis-a-vis Bucharest. Once again, when one rereads the trilogy, one realizes what an amazing job Papadat Bengescu is doing in that regard as well. So let me continue. Engaging in the discourse of defining women's new identity and their role within a still patriarchal cultural space, Papadat Bengescu's The Disheveled Maidens makes room for Mini, the author's mouthpiece, whose first name only identity suggests that her identification by a full name is less important than her reporting on events, than maintaining a lens-like focus on the city. Her role is to uncover what was really at stake in the moral geography of the Romanian nation and that of its capital, and to record the potential disordering of the country's traditional society and the growing participation of women in redefining it. Out of step with the Romanian cultural assumption of the era, which required that young girls or unmarried women in the outskirts of the city, as well as in towns, villages, or rural places in general, wear their hair braided and tied on their head, împletite, as a sign of their virginity, the new fashionable women of the Disheveled Maidens appear in public with their hair loose, dyed, wild, or curly, despletite. Thus, although no mention of tightly braided hair pertains to the heroines of Disheveled Maidens, and even though through the course of events they do become spiritually disheveled or distraught, the novel's title in Romanian, Fecioarele Despletite, which I translated as The Disheveled Maidens, serves as an outright sign that Papadat Bengescu's heroines, having long lost their virginity, purity, and innocence, have ceased to adhere to traditional cultural norms like the obligatorily braided hair. The association of a woman's unbraided hair with sexual depravity appears early on in the novel when Mini speaks of a woman who had just given birth to a baby, born as if from her blonde, snake-like curls. And I quote, "I saw a young girl wearing a yellow silken shirt under her hospital gown, bending over a little yellow worm of a baby she was holding in her lap. A huge wave of curly blonde hair hung spread over her face. Through the golden snakes of this adornment, I could hardly make out a withered face. Surely that poor yellowish larva had been born from that amazing hair. In the city space, women colored their hair, cut it short, cropped at the neck, like Nori, Mini's friend, or wear it wild, curly, African-like hair that grows up straight and curly like Mikale's. So it's just this incredible variety of hairdos. Think about the time, the early 1920s, to have such characters within a novel is absolutely a pioneering narrative. Unforgettably portrayed in the excerpt that follows, such desiring women or disheveled maidens are represented by a model with the professional perfection of a cover girl, a woman with very narrow hips and wearing the latest fashions. She appears to Mini as, and I quote, some her eyelashes and eyelids, so that her eyes look like two black spots on their chalk white face. She wore the front of her hair as a curly tussle, violently peroxided and so high that it exceeded the tiny wrinkled face. Now I'm going to stop here for think about that description. I mean, this comes from a Romanian writer in the 1920s. I go back to the quote. She walked around in ball gowns of a nakedness that induced no trace of impudence in the aspect of her absent body, while in the fiery tuft of her hair, she displayed the insolent glory of an immense aigrette feather. Or she would disappear in the rigid circumference of hoop-skirted flounces in some stylish modeling garb, her forehead tightly bound with some broad ribbon, which made her head look like quite morbid. She was a regular night customer of restaurants frequented by foreigners in which drinking, not lovemaking, was the main vice. And she was reputed for her prim attire and her everlasting insomnia. Night after night, she kept staring at the yellowish liquid in the permanently filled glasses. Who knows what caprice of alcohol or insomnia had once dishonored the artifice of her barren orgies. So these are the painted women, the demimondes who inhabit city spaces, representing a particular potent and obvious form of transgressive behavior. Since their attractiveness was based on the skill with which they disguise their real looks, either through makeup or stylish clothes or hair, they use fashion to hide their true selves. Related to sexual passion and fueled by their passion for clothes, their idleness, boredom, and vanity led them down the perilous path of overconsumption. So, and then there is a description of the city which Mini imagines like a belt, so close, so precious that it seems to be made of the very fibers that sustain the diffuse substances of our own bodies within our structure, which by its consistence girdles a fluid dispersion of our blood. This is how she perceives the city. So every time I walk through a city, I think of that description of the city as a belt that sustains the fluid of our blood. So Papadat Bengescu's choice of a feminine narrator as a woman embedded in the city is probably no coincidence. And then I talk about writers who consider that women are associated with urban spaces. And I don't want to bore you with those quotes, but I want to say that Papadat Bengescu's ability to buy into and recreate the realm to which women are assigned and through which they define themselves enable her to make her way in the city, first Chicago and New York. I'm not now talking about Sister Carrie, because it is to Theodore Dreiser's Sister Carrie that I think the novel, The Disheveled Maidens, could be best compared. Both are novels of city lives So by the end of the book, in Sister Carrie, if you happen to have read that novel, Carrie becomes an actress. She's in complete control of her destiny in and through the city that is her stage. And the city is New York and Chicago. And in case you think that I'm getting carried away here, I'm sure you have heard of Sex and the City. And it's a very popular TV show. And so I think they are making a movie of it. But think about the fact that one of the principal characters is Carrie Bradshaw. So I think it is that name Carrie that takes you back to Theodore Dreiser and to Sister Carrie. And here's another dimension of Papadat Bengescu. I don't want to say it is just, but okay. There is Virginia Woolf, but most importantly, there is Theodore Dreiser, who is known to most writers as the author, to most readers as the author of the American tragedy, Tragedia Americana, which I remember having read in Romania in the 60s. It was still very popular. Think about his novel, Dreiser's novel, Sister Carrie, in which Carrie, the humble country girl who becomes the celebrated actress of the stage, really parallels her rise into prominence and fame to New York and Chicago. And this is exactly what happens in both The Disheveled Maidens and The Hidden Way. Both Mini in the first novel and then Kokaeme in the third novel of the trilogy speak of Bucharest as a formative space. So in The Hidden Way, you have these parties where women show up dressed in slacks and they look just like male presences. And again, this is the 1920s in Bucharest. So Papadat Bengescu's role is largely unknown. And it was mentioned earlier that she's forgotten. Honestly, I don't think it's a matter of forgetting about her. It's just a matter of not even bringing her in the forefront. There's a lot more that I would have to say, but Madalina is telling me that I only have 3 more minutes. So I would like for her to help me show some of the slides of Bucharest with particular spaces and places that are nominally present in the novel. And here they are. And so I'm sure you all recognize that. This is a description of the night. And so that description of the night actually appears in a novel which is called of the winter. I'm sorry, I meant to say winter, not night. Appears in a description of a novel which is called Athene Palace. And it is in this novel that you see a description of Bucharest covered by snow that looked like a fur. And the novel belongs to a time correspondent at the time, Countess Waldeck, who was actually a spy staying at the Athene Palace. And she describes Bucharest, especially Bucharest in the winter. And this is such a scene that could be descended from Countess Waldeck's novel, Athene Palace, but it is also a space mentioned in Papadat Bengescu's fiction. So let's go on, Madalina, if you don't mind. Okay, so there you have it. Oops. And there's Cala Victoriei, and of course here it is, Old Bucharest and the Athenaeum. So un leu pentru Ateneu, that's un leu pentru Ateneu. So there you go, that beautiful construction. I was in Bucharest at the Athene Palace and just saw that beautiful, magnificent building. And of course, inside, I always take my students to show them the murals that present the history of Romania in beautifully embellished murals. So let's go on. And here you have the National Theater that was bombed. And there it is, the National Theater. And then what else do we have? And then again, we have Capșa. And so for those of us who love Bucharest, here it is, the military circle, Cercul Militar. There are no streetcars anymore, but Calea Victoriei is still very crowded on any given day. And I don't know about you, but every time I go to Bucharest, I reread in my mind Papadat Bengescu's description. And one last thing, and I don't think we have it in the slides, but the house of Elena Drăgănescu in concert music, in the music by Bach, concert of music, of Bach music. You see the house of Elena Drăgănescu on Boulevard Lascar Catargiu. So all those beautiful homes that embellished interbellum Bucharest, they are all in her fiction. And so if there is a monument, a narrative monument to Bucharest, to the beauty of Bucharest, that would be in Papadat Bengescu's novels. So there it is. That brings always emotion to my heart to see the beautiful Bucharest. Thank you. And so we will continue with our next presenter. And it will be my pleasure to present Professor Mudure. Again, I don't think that there are enough words to present Professor Mudure, who is here with us from Cluj, a beautiful city. And there's always a rivalry in my heart between Bucharest and Cluj, but there she is. And you can read the little blurb on Professor Mudure and her incredible academic career. I would just like to say that she is an amazing academic. I visited her classes during my Fulbright year in Romania, and I was impressed with her students and the way in which she teaches. I know that she's well steeped into both Romanian and American cultures. I'm always fascinated by her presence. I am fascinated by her room that is painted in that chartreuse green, which is, by the way, the color of the year, in case you were not aware of it. So once again, thank you, Professor Mudure, for joining this panel today. I know it is evening in Cluj, so you have the floor. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Ileana. This is really overwhelming. I do not deserve this very generous presentation, but yes, I remember with great pleasure our meetings in Cluj, and hope you will come again. And thank you very much for accepting my presence at ARA. I had heard a lot of things about ARA, but this is a great occasion to meet you in person. I have decided to talk to you today not about women during the interbellum, but about Hortensia Papadat Bengescu in English, because English is the lingua franca of today. So it is very important to have Hortensia Papadat Bengescu in English, and we owe this to the devoted work of Ilana Orlic. I think we must emphasize this. So although canonical within the borders of the Romanian public letters, as has already Papadat Bengescu is practically unknown in the to international readerships. Has she been translated? Yes, but not enough. One of the earliest translations of her work, not in English, but in Czech, was published during a very interesting period, 1941, by Elena Langova, a Czech scholar, a specialist in Romance languages. And as you remember, in 1941, Czechoslovakia did not exist as such. So Elena Langova worked on this translation while her country was under German occupation, and from the information that I have found, it helps her forget the dire circumstances of her country. Then there are several Hungarian translators who worked on Papadat Bengescu. Both a concert of music by Bach has been translated into English and published in Bucharest and in Budapest. It was under the communist regime by two publishing houses, okay, of course, state-owned. The author of the translation being Eva Levandai. And then the disheveled maidens, to use the translation that Ileana imposed. Laszlo Csiki is the author of this Hungarian version of this novel. In the 70s, translated into German the whole Halipa cycle. Again, it was a joint venture between German publishing house, a publishing house from East Germany, and Criterion. This was very common at that time. It was a strategy, part of communist Romania's cultural policy to have these joint ventures with publishing houses from in Bulgarian, Gergana Stratieva. So also in the 70s, she offered to the readerships the whole cycle of Halipa in Bulgarian. And then in the 80s, the Polish translation of a concert of music by Bach, the author of the translation being again a scholar, specialist in Romance languages, Danuta Biankowski, professor at the University of Warsaw at that time, according to my information. And more recently, our Hungarian colleagues, some of them colleagues of mine from Babes-Bolyai University, translated the short stories of some short stories of Hortensia Papadat Bengescu. This collection came out in 2009 in Budapest. Okay, this is very fine, I would say, but of course, we agree all languages are beautiful, all languages are important, but however, there are some languages that have wider readerships for reasons which, of course, do not have any connection with their beauty, linguistic relevance, their capacity to reflect the reality, but with other historical circumstances. So, what about other languages? French, for instance, there is one translation of the concert by Florica Curiol, and the Spanish one, which came out in 1998, so again after 1990, and in 2010, a Spanish translation by Joaquin Garrigos. Both of them, both Curiol and Garrigos, translated the famous concert. Now, in English, again, we have to be grateful to Ileana for her dedicated work. Professor Orlic translated not only a concert of music by Bach, but also The Hidden Way, The Disheveled Maidens, the whole Halipa trilogy came out at Presa Universitară Clujană in 2007. I was disappointed to see, however, that only The Disheveled Maidens was translated under the auspices of the Romanian Cultural Institute publishing house. I think, and I will come back to this idea, I'm sorry that I'm a bit critical, but I can't help it. I think this institution should have paid much more attention to the work of our colleague Liliana has translated not only Hortensia Papadat Bengescu, but just for your information, she has translated Sadoveanu, Hyasanis, she has translated Ciuleandra, Rebreanu, she has translated Mara, Sadoveanu. Again, only Mara, 2003, came out under the auspices of the Romanian Cultural Foundation Publishing House. The other translations were published by other publishing houses, academic publishing houses, for instance, European Studies Foundation Publishing House of Cluj. Now, I want to insist a little bit on Professor Orlich's strategies as translator and literary critic, literary historian, in connection with a concert of music by Bach. And I want to emphasize the fact that all these translations are accompanied by a critical study, which is extraordinary work and very useful. And in these critical studies, Professor Orlich circumscribes Bengescu to Western scholarship that is best known to Western readerships. For instance, she connects in the introductory study to a concert. Then she uses Judith Butler's performativity and Joseph Scott's idea about the metaphors, gendered metaphors that circulate in the societal discourse, and she applies these notions to Papadat Bengescu. I was also impressed and sympathized in a feminist way with her challenge of the patriarch of Romanian literary criticism, George Călinescu. In the Romanian Republic of Letters, few dare to criticize openly Călinescu, even if when he said irrelevant things, such as his famous statement from the history of Romanian literature that women cannot get out of their feminine condition, and so they can only write about themselves. They are not able to be creators in the full sense. It's a minorizing perspective. Again, in my effort to characterize Professor Orlich as a translator, as a scholar I did up to now, but as a translator, let me use an article that has just come out in a Cluj literary journal, which I appreciate very much, Apostroph, run by Marta Petreu. In the latest issue of Apostrophe, there is an article by Jean-Louis Coriol about Lucian Blaga in French. And Jean-Louis Coriol, I remind you, his wife translated from Papadat Bengescu, talks about the difficulties encountered by a translator, and especially the difficulties encountered by a translator who is interested in Romanian literature and culture. And I sum up some ideas from his article. By the way, Apostrophe can be found on the internet as well, and I'm sure you will find very many interesting things in this journal. So Coriol says that the translator is extraordinarily important in any culture, in any literature, because it is upon his or her work that tradition is founded, or there is no authentic culture, says Coriol, without an opening towards other cultures. And this opening towards other cultures is only possible through translation. Coriol touches a very interesting problem: who a Romanian, a foreigner, in our case, a native English, a Romanian who lives now in an English-speaking country, he hesitates or refuses to give a definite answer. In his opinion, the team of translators, because this is also an option, must be competent work. Translation should be acknowledged as a profession, rewarded as it deserves. And this is the only way, so to have good translators and good translations, this is the only way to make Romanian cultural values known all over the world. And now I have prepared a PowerPoint. I try to enter the very laboratory of translation. So I chose some fragments and try to enter the translator's mind. Mini atinsese cu precauțiuni portița grilajului, proaspăt voptiți, urcase scara necunoscută cu acea emoție pe care o poate da o scară urcată pentru întâia oară. What I found particularly difficult, how to translate grilage. I liked the version, the solution found by Professor Orlic, Picket Fence. And then urcase scara necunoscută. You know, another translator might have used unknown, not, but unfamiliar, again, I think it's a better solution because it introduces us into this domestic environment, which is so important for female writers. In the critical study accompanying the translation, Professor Orlic insists upon this element. Another example here. Se oprise în fața ușii mari cu geamuri galbene. I'm sorry I couldn't use diacritics. Crețe ca o foaie de celuloid gofrat și care nu-i plăceau, apoi sunase cu acea sficiune pe care o ai în fața unei uși cu geamuri galbene, în dărătul căreia se găsesc oameni abia strădați. Words and phrases, crețe, and ca o foaie de celuloid gofrat. You see that in Romanian we have an adjective and we have a comparison, which is also an adjectival construction. Professor Orlic chose to render this through verbal constructions. We have two secondary sentences. I think, again, this is a very good solution to use the verb, which we know gives force and emphasis to the style. Then, in the Romanian translation, we see we have one long sentence. After plăceau, there is a comma, and she goes on, apoi la. The English translation cuts that long sentences into two. I think, again, it's a very good solution because the sentence would have been a bit too long. And in the Romanian version, the word geamuri is repeated, geamuri galbene, which again, Romanian translation, by the way, Papafat-Bengescu has been appreciated for the narrative construction of her books, but stylistically, sometimes one could make observations to her style, also because she was Francophone and she was very Francophone. So the translator chose to use pains instead of widows. And then, în dărătul căreia se găsesc oameni abia strămutați. Again, here we have an adjectival construction. In the translation, we have a secondary sentence, though the verb again is used in order to give force to the author's style. And the last example, I don't want to annoy you too much with these grammar comments and lexicology comments. Doctorița Alina Bondoaca lui soție, very difficult to translate Bondoaca. I appreciate it very much. His thick-set wife, the solution found by Professor Orlic, era afonă, was perfectly tone deaf. Again, the translator found a very good solution to describe this disability. And era un bloc impermeabil. Now, for the Romanian reader, impermeabil would mean, first of all, something else, a waterproof, rainproof coat. So the solution found by the translator is very good. An impenetrable block. She doesn't follow slavishly the Romanian words. She doesn't look for the easiest solutions, but for the most eloquent. Care slușa de adăpost, who sheltered few thoughts. You see this predicate, this verb, which brings the verb to the front and makes the verb a very important element in Bengescu's sentence. I want to say insist a little bit on the fact that unfortunately Romanian literary journals do not make serious critique of translations. Usually an article about a translation looks like an article of comparative literature, study of world literature, something like that. Very, very few critics dare to look and compare the original with the solutions found by the translators, and then give further proof of the hard work that the translator did, and also give proofs of his or her talents. I want to end by congratulating Ileana, by thanking her for her devotion and hard work for Romanian culture, for Romanian literature. And again, I hope that specialized institutions, again, such as the Romanian Cultural Institute will give up certain presentees, which in my opinion is very aggressive, especially has been very aggressive, especially for the last 20 years. This is not a good strategy, in my opinion. There should be a balanced cultural policy, both classics such as I don't know, Rebreanu, Slavic, so on and so forth, and contemporary writers. Both should be paid attention to and translations funded. Of course, contemporary translators have networks, vote, etc., etc. The dead ones, they do not have any more networks, but they are extremely important in making Romanian culture known. And from my own experience, I have contributed to several reference works published by very respectable publishing houses, Routledge and others, for instance, the Dictionary of Erotic Literature, the Dictionary of Masculinities, and whenever I wanted to suggest a Romanian writer or a Romanian work, I was always told, yes, this is very interesting, but has this work been translated? If it's not translated, no, because the reader of the dictionary would like to find out more after reading your entry, which is perfectly normal. And also allow me to use this opportunity also to congratulate Sean Cotter for his translation on a masterpiece of Romanian literature, Crai de la Curtea Veche, and I hope he will continue translating other such great and important. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mikhail. I really am very grateful for your kind comments. Thank you. Translation is certainly a difficult project. And again, I am filled with admiration for Sean Cotter, and he will tell you that I asked him, how did you translate Pena Corcodusha? This is a character in the old Rake's Court, and he said, well, I didn't, I just used this description, and so, okay, Sean could talk about that. Maybe we should have an entire session on Sean's translation of that incredible novel. I also want to add very, very quickly, Michaela, that I am full agreement with you about the Romanian Cultural Institute. For instance, I'm finishing up the translation of a very important book on Dimitrie Cantemir. Now, this is not literature. This has to do with politics, with social, cultural geography, Everyone has heard about Russia. Everyone has heard about Turkey, and before that, the Ottoman Empire. And here is Cantemir, a scholar of the Enlightenment, a member of the Academy in Berlin, proposed for membership by Leibniz, in case you wonder who proposed him as a member. And so I know that I'm going to hit a lot of roadblocks in the process of having this published. I researched the archives in Moscow because some of this correspondence between Cantemir and the Tsar has not been translated. And I know it will be very difficult to have it published, so I agree with you. If Cantemir is not important for the balance, the equilibrium of politics and international relations in today's Europe, I don't know who is. Okay, so thank you very much. Moving on to our own Shannon Ditto, and I say our own because she is one of the most impressive young scholars I have known in my 40 years of academic teaching. She's fluent in French, native fluency in French. She was a Fulbright recipient in Strasbourg in France. She's equally proficient in German. She's a rising star, and I am very, very proud of having her among my doctoral candidates. I feel very honored to be on her committee, but at any rate, Shannon is the kind of young scholar to whom one should be thinking twice about mentioning a book, because she will read it within the next 24 hours. So there she is. I am very, very pleased that she has agreed to be on this panel at this very busy time in her life when she's completing her doctoral work. Please, Shannon.
Hi, I just want to say, as the only non-Romanian person on this panel, that it's so nice to have the opportunity to read translated works. I work in translation myself, and I know that sometimes you wonder if anybody gets the translation. It's hard to disseminate the work. But as a student, I just want to say I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be able to learn more about Romanian culture and literature, and for the opportunity to be able to speak about it today. So today I'm going to talk about a little bit about dissolution of form within Hortensia Papadat Bengescu's work, as well as the frontier work she did with body horror and the idea of this kaleidoscopic dissolution of form. So, if the casual reader is going to pick up Hortensia Papadat Bengescu's oeuvre, they would think that they accidentally strolled into William S. Burroughs' Naked Lunch or Goya's Black paintings, populated with devolving humanoid creatures creeping within hazy shadows. It's easy to believe that you're reading a David Cronenberg film. However, before either Burroughs or Cronenberg, within the permeable walls of a rapidly expanding 20th century Romania, artists are contending with the dizzying dissolution of class and gender boundaries in the face of a rapid assimilation into Western Europe. While rural communities swarmed in droves to Bucharest, nicknamed Little Paris, a modern cosmopolitan city, the bourgeoisie was able to hire personal maids. And as Madame Orlich said earlier, women were cutting their hair into short bobs. Therefore, these tangible signifiers of class and gender were being ripped away from their traditional signified meaning. This dissolution and reconstitution of form, also seen in the Union of 1918 and the passing of the 1923 Constitution, was occurring at every level of life in interbellum Romania, so as to seem almost molecular in its chaos. So although Romania is considered to be an upcoming prosperous state, it inhabits a really curious paradoxical sphere, because from the macro level of the government to the microcosm of the family, the very fabric of traditional Romanian life is being pulled apart at the seams. Due to a variety of factors, the fallout from World War I, the unbinding of tradition, and globalization. So in visual art, as well as in literature, Romanian creators are manifest anxiety around the splicing of the male and the female body, the working class and the elite, and even between human and animal. as the old order metamorphosizes into an unprecedented chimera of European influences. So Papadat-Bengescu, a former World War I nurse who stood as witness to the myriad of ways in which modernity and its technology manipulates and decimates the flesh, viewed the transformations of the 20th century as almost grossly scientific, anatomical perversion. You can also see this in her work, The Dragon in 1923, which documents the history of a very idealistic young nurse. So interestingly, when the locomotive was invented in 1804, many medical scholars were worried about the effect of the machine's speed on the human body, foreseeing that the velocity would liquidate the human, but especially the female organs. Papadat-Bengescu sees this rapid acceleration of modernity in a similar light. So between streetcars, radios, the influx of American and European film, the flesh itself begins to break down at a molecular level, the atoms rearranging themselves in an increasingly perverse and grotesque ways that shatter previous notions of concrete, inert form. Even Papadat-Bengescu's narrative form splices Romanian and French literary influences, completely reshaping the Romanian novel. Interestingly, she was criticized for the corporeal violence she inflicted on the Romanian narrative body. Teodorescu declared himself horrified by the hemorrhaged sense of Papadat-Bengescu's narrative. That is a very physiological way of describing this narrative shift. Ionescu claims she places shabby and dimly mended masks of French literature on Romanian faces. However, these blurred lines between the home and the outside, the self and the other, is precisely Papadat-Bengescu's goal in destabilizing all boundaries, including the metaphysical narrative, to reflect Romania's kaleidoscopic and porous evolution. In the first installment, The Disheveled Maidens, the physical revolt of the human body through either disease, trauma, or mutation against these attempts to accelerate figuratively stem from a contamination of the spiritual body, which obliterates Cartesian dualism. This rapid acceleration of modernity and its radioactive fallout has unmasked the Heimlich from the home sphere, rendering it foreign as a result of both internal and external forces. It's beheaded and cannibalized the patriarchal, social, and physical Romanian body in order to make room for the rise of this monstrous feminine. This is seen not only in the dissolution of the body, but the permeability of language itself and this loss of sense, whether it be through blindness or auditory. So within the first chapter of The Disheveled Maidens, Papadat-Bengescu portrays this unveiling of the Heimlich within the Halapa home as representative of Romania's barren theatrical machinations of the home sphere in result of the opening towards Western Europe. Rendered artificial to the point of absurdity, the family unit becomes almost a perverse pastiche of a comedy of manners, a parody of its own Westernization. In Freud's 1919 Das Unheimliche, the theorist describes the inherent paradox of the unheimlich, or the uncanny, as something that is not from the home, while simultaneously revealing that which has been hidden in the domestic that was never supposed to be revealed. Mini quickly foretells this unveiling of the uncanny within the home, foreshadowing its dissolution by the corruption of the architectural lines of the Halapa estate. So upon descending the drive to the estate, she realizes that the family's prized alleyway's classical curve has been compromised. The big gates of the yard are wide open rather than being fastened with their chains to two rocks, as she notices they always were at other times. And she remarks on multiple occasions during this first chapter that the only signs of disturbances were these wide open gates everywhere. And there is a lot of images of doors open where they shouldn't be. And as a result, Mini and Lena stumble into this figurative black stage of an absurd pantomime. They face the wide open door of the veranda, of this arid household, which has been disrobed of its spectacle. So Mini, who's a very scientific spectator, gifted with a dissecting eye, discovers this blonde puppet, Leonora, the matriarch of the household, limpidly regurgitating these melodramatic gestations of a second-rate silent film star who stands up, wrings her hands, bends her head backwards, grinds her teeth, bites her own hand, and then pale and out of breath falls onto the chair. This is very dramatic, and it's very reminiscent of the pantomime and early film, silent film. She's so dependent on these overwrought machinations that she's also rendered mute, perhaps due to the fact that films with synchronized dialogue wouldn't actually be invented yet until 1927. So all she can do is suddenly grab onto Lena's hand without saying anything, which is wryly described as a scene, a family scene in the grand style. And you'll notice in this first chapter that the head of the household, the gentleman farmer Halipa, is conspicuously absent. So Mini is marveling at this sterile varnish of the household, which is designed to conceal this crude second-rate quality. She begins to see these cracks in the facade of the household, and it's within these fissures that she begins to notice in the periphery this disintegration of the physical and spiritual flesh. For example, she's served a roast described as palpating raw flesh, which she immediately comes to associate with Leonora's white muscular arms detached from her writhing body. The door to the Unheimliche, to Western Europe, and to modernization has been opened and is no longer able to be closed. So the family unit, as well as the image of the home, is often theorized through the metonymy of the corporeal body, often with the father at the head of the household, and women described either as the feet or the neck if they're being generous. So Mini first dreams about this splicing of flesh when she sees Michele with the head of a fawn. The illegitimate daughter of Leonora and an Italian, she's a modern chimera, a demonic hybrid foreshadowing this unstable future of destabilized gender and national boundaries. The uncovering of this shameful secret in the home, both her Michele's rampant sexuality as well as her illegitimacy, fractures this family body through repeated images of beheading or manipulation of the head. And it is first signaled through this corruption of the architectural lines of the home, which then translate very quickly into the contour of the physical body itself. So triggered by this figurative literal opening of the gates, the foreignization of this domestic causes atoms at every level to mutate or multiply inorganically, manifesting in anatomical deformations triggered by psychic pathology, or what Mini would call the dissolution of the soul into the body, which transforms Romania into a kaleidoscopic sanitarium. As a result of the loss of gender mapping, cells are multiplying in a grotesque fashion that warps these boundaries of the flesh. And because of women's traditional associations with the body, women are codified as inherently deviant, actually, within the 1923 Constitution. They're placed among the legally incompetent. So Papadat-Bengescu firmly situates women in the body, and this link shows them to be this kind of canary in the mine of modernity's toxicity. They become this Ève unachevée, or this disheveled maiden, who is embodied ultimately by Michele, who is this modern Maenad figure described as an insect, a cold-blooded praying mantis spliced with this satanic goat, manifesting as an evil boil. She uses a lot of physical language. Like the flies and mosquitoes in the trench, Michele thrives from this decay of Romania, thrives from the decay of her own family. Described as an exoticized germ, Michele carries this threat of pathological contamination of both the figurative and the literal body. So interestingly, this perversion of the natural manifests in the swelling of the woman's head in relation to the disappearance of her hips and other reproductive codified body parts. For example, Eliza has very narrow hips with no pelvis of life. Her body was not created to bear children. Her enlarged head is morbid in contrast to the narrow little head of Lika the troubadour. While Michele is a midget, her physical body outside of the head is very shrunken. Many of the boys are being described as suffering from gigantism. And gigantic and they're anemic, both as a result of this female parasite who seems to be sucking the lifeblood, as well as this radioactivity of modernity. So dysfunction in the female reproductive organs are often a comorbidity of this spiritual pollution. Leonora, who's described as a fleshy bodily envelope, is probably the first woman to manifest this complete breakdown of the body. She eventually dies of ovarian cancer in the hidden way, which we'll talk about later. But cancer itself is an uncontrolled, corrupted multiplication of cells in an area codified as inherently feminine. So already you see this implantation of the foreign, this dysfunction of the internal, this fleur du mal that threatens to devour the entire patriarchal organism, replacing it with this perverted decadentism that reverts back to ancient images of pagan female destruction. She evokes the image of the chimera and Medusa. Earlier in the quote that Madame Orlich read, she says that a German woman is described with golden snakes for her hair. She's leaning over a little yellow worm of a baby. Mini is horrified by this taboo medical travesty, calling it a grifted branch onto the Romanian fabric. So while the Romanian woman is falling barren with her very small hips, you'll find this rampant reproduction of the foreign and the foreign woman's body. So the destabilization of the bodies only serves as a germ for the destabilization of the senses and language itself. So sights and sounds are denatured, blurred, they become quite frightening and being rendered unfamiliar through dissociation. Mini often finds her vision troubled by a luminous haze or a thick mist in the porous, shifting streets of Bucharest. In a way, Mini can be construed as a kind of modern Pinocchio who's attempting to see clearly within this shifting dark belly of the whale. Romania is a living, breathing entity whose figurative and literal borders are in constant fluctuation. And all of those within this entity are undergoing this metamorphosizing, obscure change. In this particularly terrifying episode that scared me very badly when I first read it, Mini perceives with her hazy eyes the apparition of a man who, like a newborn, appears very jaundiced, stumbling blind with washed out eyes towards the narrator. With his noiselessly clinking joints of a skeleton, he grabs desperately onto Mini's hands, trying to kiss her coattail. This evokes a fear with no palpable object, for the image itself seems to dissolve whenever she tried to outline it clearly. So words themselves seem to devolve within this dizziness of the kaleidoscope, lacking any solid form. She says that so many sensations had not yet coagulated their sounds. Coagulated is such a unique corporeal word because it's often used to describe blood. So words become diluted or blurred until one becomes a deaf-blind instrument. Men are rendered mute. Lika becomes voiceless. He can only whistle. And Mini, when he does speak, his words are obscure and unfathomable to Mini's ear. So this permeability of the intangible as well as tangible acts as a isolating agent between men and women, but as well as the person and their own language. So to wrap up very quickly, societies have always used the tangible body to describe an interiority. They use in order to solidify psychological concepts. For example, to be clear-eyed, to be sensible, to have your head on straight. There's a lot of images of the head, especially in this installment. So we describe this internality through the experience of externality, but what do we do when the body breaks down? Because in the body breaking down, It leads to the intangible words, the senses completely being reinvented, and these boundaries are in constant fluctuation and negotiation. Body horror is mankind's first and final fear. It confronts this complicated relationship that we have with our own bodies, but also how we construe boundaries that distinguish us from the other. So while the threat of contagion comes from external, in this case, globalizing forces, this foreign contagion is also within us. The unheimlich is both without and within us. And this gate that opened to westernization, this gate that threw everything into chaos, is unable to be closed back up. And I think above all, so many authors of this time period, Papadat-Bengescu is able to capture this ever evolving carousel of both corporeal and intangible boundaries. Merci for listening. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shannon. That was absolutely wonderful. So now we know what a translation of Papadat-Bengescu can do for the highly talented, extraordinary students in comparative literature. And Shannon certainly is a glorious exemplar. Thank you so much. It's a wonderful presentation. Following in that same vein is Professor Meirosu's presentation. Professor Meirosu played the principal role in organizing this symposium. She worked very hard. She must be credited with everything that goes well with this panel. I thank her very, very much. She's also a remarkable scholar. She's focused on gender studies, sexuality, but also medical humanities. And she's a professor of gender studies and sexuality. I'm very grateful to Madalina for her hard work. And I welcome her presentation, which tags along Shannon's excursion into the body and all that Papadat-Bengescu's work offers to the modern, updated scholarly vision in the medical humanities. So, Madalina, please.
Thank you so much for this generous introduction, and thank all of you for these amazing papers. Luckily enough, not everything has been said. Hortensia Papadat Bengescu's work is so multifaceted and so rich in meanings that I still have something to say. And I will keep my own time. I'm pretty good with delivering 15-minute presentations due to all sorts of different experience in a different life when I had to deliver 15-minute presentations on river cruises on the Danube, but on that some other time. Let me tell you a little bit about my paper. So this paper is an excerpt from a longer project that considers Hortensia Papadat Bengescu's contribution to the medical humanities. Medical humanities is a multifaceted and protean field that, according to Anne Whitehead and Angela Woods, and I quote here, names a series of intersections, exchanges, and entanglements between the biomedical sciences, the arts and the humanities, and the social sciences, end quote. Now, my own work in the medical humanities often works on metaphors of illness and the role they play both in medical context and in society at large to describe illness and suffering. For example, cancer treatment is rife with war metaphors, right? We speak of a war on cancer, doing battle against cancer, or being invaded by enemy cells, and so forth. We also use metaphors of disease outside the medical context. For example, I avoid him like the plague, right? So researchers like Susan Sontag, Patricia Clough, and Arthur Frank have examined the role of illness metaphors in everyday speech to highlight the effect of metaphorical language on our relationships, both with our suffering bodies and the world around us. Hortensia Papadat Bengescu's Halipa cycle, which we've already encountered in earlier presentations, speaks to many of the central concerns of the medical humanities. And this is really important. So it depicts doctors and patients and the interactions between them, including the character of Lina, a female doctor who practices medicine in the interbellum period. It presents spaces of healing and dramatizes the role these spaces play in recovery. It provides compelling fictional representations of various kinds of illnesses, both physical and mental. It features scenes of death and dying, along with mourning, that help readers to better appreciate the burdens of human frailty. In effect, Papadat Bengescu gives us a picture of the Romanian medical landscape in the interbellum period, one that, thanks in part to her own experience as a nurse, does not romanticize medical professionals or their relationship with patients. I would like to point out that in giving us this picture, she sometimes employs illness not as an element of the story, but as a metaphor that plays the role of an organizing principle in the narrative. In making the story turn on metaphors of illness, she shows us the revelatory power of metaphors of illness. So this presentation will explore one of the ways in which she does this, while also giving you a sense of how Papadat Bengescu treats uterine cancer in The Hidden Way, or Drumul Ascuns, published in 1932. The lives of some of the characters that appear in the previous volumes intersect yet again in this novel, with Lenora at the heart of the narrative, now married to Walter, who takes pleasure in marrying his beautiful former patient, Lenora, though not so much because he cherishes her, but because he cherishes the potential he sees in such union to wipe away the scandal surrounding the acquisition of his fortune. He had essentially sold himself to an elderly married woman, becoming her lover in order to receive the luxurious clinic he owns. The couple invite Coca Eme, Lenora's daughter from a previous marriage, to live with them. So Eme slowly assumes control over the household and eventually over her mother, and finally marries Walter after Lenora's death following a long bout with cancer. One is hard-pressed to find literary representations of ovarian cancer in Romanian interbellum literature. There are few representations of women's cancer to speak of, and when it figures as a trope, it assumes the form of breast cancer, as in the case of Ionel Teodoreanu's character Olguța from La Medeleni, published in 1936. Here, the description of illness constitutes a vague background to Olguța's unhappy story and her subsequent decision to commit suicide. By contrast, in Papadat Bengescu's novels, Lenora's cancer is the driving force of the plot. Lenora has a long history of drawing attention to herself with the help of fainting fits. These health episodes associated with nervous agitation, when carefully orchestrated, place her at the center of her family's and friends' attention, a position from which she can then accrue, through emotional blackmail, certain advantages. In the first novel of the Halipa cycle, already mentions here, so this one begins with Lenora in the throes of a nervous breakdown, right in the Disheveled Maidens, because of a scandal in the family. The reader becomes accustomed to seeing Lenora suffer publicly in exaggerated fashion, theatrically, using her real and exaggerated suffering to extort attention, love, or a desired action from those around her. It is due to her deteriorated mental health that she meets Walter, who, once again, is first her doctor before becoming her lover and ultimately her husband. Her exaggerated behavior during these episodes and the public display of her failing mental health confirmed that mental illness or instability is a socially acceptable illness, perhaps even expected of women. And Lenora, who has interiorized her expectations of her gender, is happy to oblige. She is presented in the early novels as a sensual woman who employs a socially constructed feminine arsenal to obtain what she desires, to the point that her voice is muted in her relationships, smothered in conventional, mechanical behaviors that are guaranteed to obtain the desired result. Excuse me. She uses such fits to get what she wants, and as soon as her daughter moves in, to obtain what her daughter wants. So when Aimee, pretending to talk to Lenora, complains in the presence of Walter about the family meals that have to be taken with other doctors from the sanatorium, Lenora comes, and I quote, out of nothingness to burst into nervous weeping, and then, afraid that her weeping was ill-timed, she changed it into a nervous breakdown. She lay on the couch in her room with closed eyes while Aimee was fussing around her as if a catastrophe had occurred, end quote. So Walter is irritated because he can see that this is theater, but also intrigued. And as always, the drama works in Lenora's, and in this case, Aimee's favor, for she obtains what she wants. In Walter's view, since her arrival, Aimee feels like, and I quote, an aggressive illness in front of which one had to stay permanently on the defense and consequently to keep an eye on, end quote. By metaphorically referring to Aimee as an aggressive illness, the omniscient narrator, speaking from Walter's perspective, foreshadows the denouement and offers a clue to a more discerning reading of the novel. In contrast to the public spectacle of her nervous fits, Lenora's physical suffering stemming from cancer remains hidden for a long time, long enough for the cancer to progress to a point where it becomes a death sentence. Limited by social norms that confine her femininity to her sexual attractiveness, which Lenora in turn locates in her sexual organs, Lenora chooses to hide her suffering for fear it would diminish her value in front of her husband. It is, excuse me, it is a distant niece of Lenora, Nori, so the name of this niece is Nori, right, who first notices signs of illness, though it is clear that both Aimee and Walter are subconsciously aware that something is wrong, but because they tend to ignore Lenora in general, it is all the easier to ignore the illness. Nori is worried that Lenora, quote, looks as if she was embalmed, and is unable to believe that the family, so the great physician, the loving daughter, cannot have noticed the stench coming from the ill woman. Nori confronts Lenora and threatens to tell her husband about the illness. By this point, Lenora's pain has become excruciating. And I quote, Lenora was groaning and writhing like a patient suffering from cholera, end quote. For her part, Lenora is terrified by the deep suspicion that something is terribly wrong. Only 10 days later, Lenora looks like she has been ravaged by the blue plague, which is the cholera, right? And I quote here, her eyes were circled with bluish rings that resembled a pair of black pansies with a blue core. Her hair was neatly in place. She was carefully made up, but her lips looked parched. Excuse me, end quote. While her ailing appearance is a testimony to her family's lack of concern for her health, she is adorned with the material gifts she has received for her birthday, such as a pearl necklace from Walter that drapes loosely on her thin neck, ringed by 2 wrinkles. This shocked Nori so much the more that she had been admiring Lenora's, and I quote, white, ample double chin, end quote. When Lenora moves, stench hits Nori in the face. The ill woman is in obvious pain, but she continues to insist on concealing it. Quote, it is true that it hurts a little, but it started only a day ago. I will certainly tell the doctor about it, end quote. So, incidentally, Three key symptoms of endometrial, so uterine cancer, are bleeding, pelvic pain, and weight loss. And Papadat Bengescu dramatizes all three in the story. This reference to wadding tampons call to mind the bleeding, as does the stench already referred to. The weight loss is shown in the scene with the necklace, and the pelvic pain is framed by the cholera metaphor that I've already shared with you, as well as the small moment when Lenora timidly admits it's true. It hurts a little inside. That's what she says, right? Importantly, Lenora's reaction to her health crisis mirrors the reaction to losing control of the household following Aimé's move into the house. In both cases, she is shaken and perplexed in the face of loss, the loss of control of her body, the loss of control of her household. And yet she subdues her own agony as she continues to silently support her daughter, whether by trying to hide her physical suffering so as not to worry Aimé, or on the home front, hiding her hurt feelings while Aimé takes over the duty of the matron of the house. A shock of recognition stuns Walter when, upon hearing a remark of Nori, he finally registers that Lenora is sick. And I quote, on hearing the response, he froze on the spot, like the bronze lamppost in the hall. Then the blood that flooded through his brain seemed to slap and punch him. The certainty of a more serious disease was now flowing through him with the speed of an invasion, end quote. The term invasion is a metaphorical way of talking about the advance of a cancer that has become all too real and menacing for him. But it also reminds the reader of his reaction to Aimé's invasion of his house and marriage. Recall, I was talking at the beginning that Walter sees Aimé as an aggressive illness. And in fact, the shock that he experiences when he realizes Lenora's situation parallels the shock he later feels when he realizes that Aimé has supplanted Lenora's position in the household. Once the diagnosis is made, Lenora's, and I quote, poor body is shaken by currents of anxiety, while deep inside, the fatal nest kept relentlessly carrying out its deadly work, the fatal nest. So the fatal nest is a metaphorical way to refer to Lenora's uterus. Yet, this is another piece of the puzzle that reveals the hidden logic of the novel. Lenora will die different deaths because of her uterus, once because of her cancer and twice because of the product of the fatal nest, Aimé, who has slowly edged her off the stage, both in the household and her marriage. Excuse me. Walter discerns this particular part of the illness clearly. Aimé was indeed a dangerous illness, a cancer that took over the house, which of course, the house itself is a nest, right? Lenora's demise is both a social one and a physical one, and it is connected to Aimé's hidden path to power and wealth and to the cancer's hidden path to Lenora's body. They both kill Lenora in their respective ways, but Aimé will remain to continue her work on the house and Walter. And so we see just how pregnant with meaning is the melody of uterine cancer. The danger comes from uterus. Cancer comes from the uterus, as does the daughter, the fruit of the womb, who invades Lenora's life like a cancer, like an aggressive illness. So in this way, cancer is both, in its both physical and metaphorical form, is the structural element that lays at the foundation of the novel. So just to sum up, Hortensia Papadat Bengescu's description of uterine cancer is in itself medically relevant, showing how societal pressures of gender expectations may prevent patients from seeking medical help. Additionally, she uses uterine cancer as a vivid and poetic way to convey the essence of Aimé. She has an intuitive appreciation for the power of illness metaphors and uses them in an exemplary fashion. And in doing so, she shows us how we use these illness metaphors in our everyday lives and how they shape our understanding of the world around us, even as they shape our own illness experiences. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madalina. And yes, she has been ill and she's been having fever and coughing, and nevertheless, she did not want to, how should I say, disappoint us by not being with us today. So I am very grateful. Tremendous role and the fact that she heroically resisted. Thank you for a wonderful presentation. And thank you, thank you, thank you. I think we are ending our scholarly panel, so to speak. So I'm going to once again thank the presenters for their extraordinary presentations that I think put Papadat Bengescu's work into a different light. She is so much with us in every single way. Everything that is of interest in our world is clearly a part of her work. So much ahead of the times, 100 years ago, if you can imagine, almost. So actually more than 100 years ago. So now I'm going to defer to Madalina, and she's going to give us the next presentation and introduction to our program for the day.
So the next thing on our program is a poem that was written by Ioan Miclău, who was born in 1940. So he is a Romanian writer who lives in Australia. He is a poet, a playwright, a journalist, an author who is always promoting Romanian culture in Australia. Founder of various literary groups in Australia as well. Just a few books that he's written, Poezia Lese, Volume 1 and 2, Teatru, Fica Zeiței Vesta, and all sorts of other novels as well. So what I can tell you is that as soon as he heard that we are doing this particular session on Hortensia Papadat Bengescu, he was terribly moved, and he was moved to actually writing a poem about Hortensia Papadat Bengescu. So this is an homage to Hortensia Papadat Bengescu by Ioan Miclău, to whom we are very thankful. The poem was written in Romanian, and it was translated into English by Tea Mercufăr. And Tea Mercufăr is with us right now in this particular session, and she is going to recite the poem. Tea Mercufăr was born and raised in Romania, and she immigrated to the United States with her family in 1987. She's an award-winning actor and documentary filmmaker, and is currently in production with a documentary series about people living in tents on the streets of Los Angeles, and a podcast that explores the secret lives of teens. She dabbles in writing and translating, and you'll see one of the products of her work here. So thank you very much, Tea. Go ahead.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here, and I really enjoyed everyone's presentation. Thank you. A lot of work went into it, and I appreciate it. Yearning carves my verse in stone like a chisel, digging deep. Images appear alone. Without rhyme at me they leap, scribbling pages that I own. But in time, like a sweet wine, yearning catches on to art. Subtly, it corrupts the mind. And on wings of bleeding heart, with the galaxies it will align. Yearning, branded on my brain, a deep mark for fantasy. Now it chases me around, always courting poetry, up and down. But it's in vain. Worse than the worst enemy, and of this I am assured. I myself cause grief and sorrow. My faults cannot be obscured. I'm a champ at hurting me. But for you, my voice is nice. Stars I place upon your breast, sun and moon and northern lights I arrange around your chest. From my heart, just paradise. But you flee, oh wondrous mist, fairy from another world. You show me the universe as a ghost with girly looks, constellations round her waist. This you are, for you I write, Hortensia Papadat Bengescu. Thank you.
Beautiful, beautiful. We want to thank the poet and thank you very much, Thea. I think that the translation, which was done in a record time of just the span of a day, is very impressive. It is really extraordinary. Thank you. And last but not least, I want to thank Ilana Costea because she made this possible. She came out of nowhere with this possibility and we just didn't know what to make of it. And so had it not been for Ilana Costea's enthusiasm, I think we would have really missed out on this amazing, very emotional and very fitting tribute to a great writer in the interpretation of a great artist and the work of a wonderful poet out there in Australia. So thank you very much, Ilana, for making this possible.
Thank you, Thea. And you know, the way in which I work with people is people I trust, people I think that they are going to do a great work. And then I kind of push them. And sometimes they say, hey, don't push me that much. So I told Thea, we need a translator. And both Madalina and Ilana only said, you cannot translate in a few days a poem. It takes up to a year to maybe translate well. So Thea did a wonderful, wonderful thing, and I knew she will. And I'm so pleased that my trust in her and my trust in all the people that I work with generally works. That means it is wonderful that people can be so responsive and so promptly doing things. And because we talked about the beauty and the importance of translation today, Thea enters in this realm of how important it is to take a poem which is in Romanian and translate it in a few days into a beautiful poem in English. Thank you, Thea.
Okay, well, I think last but not least, we would like to thank everyone. It's been what? Well, a little over 2 hours, but well worth it. And it's not my role to conclude. I think it is Madalina's or Ilana Costea's, but are we? Well, we are never finished with Papadat Bengescu.
We're never finished, right?
We continue to be grateful for this delightful morning, at least on my end. It's been quite an extraordinary way to celebrate Romanian literature, Romanian culture, and great friends, Romanian, American, Australian, whatever. Thank you so very much to everyone.
I know we're over time a little bit, but are there any questions that really are burning? Any burning questions that you would like to to discuss right now? Again, we're very well aware that we're over time.
Yeah,
and I guess that's why the conclusions, right? Yes, please.
Yes, I do have a question to the audience. I myself, Alexander Dema, I'm in Germany, and I'm born in Bucharest and grown up and went to school and high school in Bucharest. I have never heard about Hortensia Papadat Bengescu during my school time. Am I an exception or am I in a good company here?
I'll tell you one thing though, if I may, and I'm sorry to have to be so, to just throw this darkness over our luminous session. Hortensia Papadat Bengescu did not die the happiest of deaths. She was very neglected after the communist takeover of the country, and she died in poverty and most likely of starvation, while the so-called Marea Adunare Națională, which at the time was under the leadership of Thai incredible moment, Mihail Sadoveanu, they voted not to give her a pension that would have allowed her to continue to live. So the fact that you did not hear about her is an indication of, and I'm assuming you went to school at the same time when I did, and yes, I know it is true. I went to school, a high school in Bucharest as well. She was one of those people who talked about the protipendada, the higher classes that owned mansions, and even something like Boulevard Lascar Catargiu no longer existed. And I can tell you that in recent years, I went back to Bucharest and I was on a street and I said, could you please tell me where Boulevard Lascar Catargiu is? And this woman looked at me and she thought I was crazy because that's what it was. It was Boulevard Ana Ipătescu when I was living in Romania. So everything was erased. Everything was canceled. You talk about cancel culture. You had an absolute cancellation of great culture. Cioran was in no better shape as far as that goes. And I learned about Cioran and I learned about Paul Celan and about Papadat Bengescu after I came to the United States, not to mention Tristan Tzara. I never knew who Tzara was. And I had a degree in philology. So the cancellation of culture that was enacted in the 60s and the 70s was severe. So thank you for bringing that up. It's something we should be aware of when we think of canceling culture as something we want to embrace.
Well, thank you so much. I'm happy that I'm not an exception in this case.
Oh, you're not.
And I think I would launch an appeal to this audience to say I perceive it as my how to call it, my right and my duty to mention this. I looked up in the Wikipedia about Hortensia Papadat Bengescu and didn't find this chapter, and I think this is important. This is important to give the recognition. We owe her this recognition. That she has been put aside by people like Sadovanu, who was really probably one of the greatest opportunistic writers, talented but an opportunist. And I think we should come to the truth. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Right. Well, unless there are other questions, I would like to say goodbye. And
I just want to say one thing.
Ilana Costea, yes, who is really the masterminder of all these programs.
Before that, I know that there is someone around here in the audience whom you made very happy, Ilana, by mentioning the terrible thing that Zadavanu did to Hortensia Papadat Bengescu. This is Alexandru Cetățeanu. I don't want to have him started on the topic, but he really, kind of says Zadavanu might have been a fantastic writer, but he did all kinds of things which were not right. Now, what I want to say, though, is that Alexander Demar is definitely not an exception. All the people I talk to, Romanians, educated, even Romanians in literature or in the humanities, know very little about Hortensia Papadat Bengescu. Some of them said, yeah, I heard about her in high school. This is the older generation, but just very little. So the fact that we do these sessions, the fact that it will go on YouTube, the fact that people hear about someone who has been erased from the history of literature is, from my point of view, extremely important. Also, from my point of view, the fact that it's difficult to pronounce your first name and I don't see well, but Miss Dito. Miss Dito is non-Romanian. So the fact that a non-Romanian gets to study and understands, and she did, by the way, a beautiful, powerful presentation. Congratulations to all of you. But I'm stressing on her because she's so young and she's non-Romanian. And that is also one of the most important things in my view. Yes, we have to not forget our language as Romanian. Yes, we have to tell our children who are Romanian about all these things, but we also have to spread the word about these wonders, which are really hidden secrets of culture. And the fact that somebody non-Romanian gets to understand her and study her is great. And I've done the same thing with a student at UCLA, who now is looking after the works of Anna Blandiana. Even she is not very much translated. And this girl at UCLA, Lika, told me, I'm looking for books for her. I want to read more. So translation is very important. I want to conclude with my impression about this session. All of you did wonderful presentations, and I congratulate you. But what is interesting is for me, who did not know much about Hortensia Papadat Bengescu, and I'm sorry, I don't feel that I should not recognize that, because it's a fact. It's a very sad fact that we have to recognize. What did I get? And maybe some of you might say that rather than asking questions. What did I get from this session? Well, I got to understand that we have somebody who, I'm meaning Hortensia Papadat Bengescu, who is a very complex writer. And she describes in her books, she describes the environment, the atmosphere of the city, which was proven by the slides that we have seen shown by Ilana Ulrich. So she doesn't just take persons and describes a story or says a story or takes a theme, but she makes us understand the deep psychology of people and the environment in which they live. And I think this is what real literature is, you know, to make you understand the whole atmosphere of your era. And that's a proof for Bucharest and for Romania during the two wars. Now, on the other hand, the fact that we talked about, and Mrs. Mudure made an excellent presentation about translations. Well, it is so important, fellows, you who are in the humanities, do push people to translate. And I'm sorry Sean Cotter is not here, because Ilana, you mentioned that we should do maybe a session on Sean Cotter. Maybe we should do a session of the importance of translation. I know Sean Cotter did a magnificent translation of Crai de Curte Veche, but there are so few people who get into translations. There are so few people who put the effort. And as a community of humanity, people in the humanities, you should do anything you can to bring someone like Miss Dito into the bandwagon and make our culture known. So what I have learned today is I learned about something I knew very little about, and someone who is extremely complex, who is a very emancipated woman. And that's also nice to know that we were there in the Balkans, and we were in 1920, a long time ago, where we had the things that are praised today and talked about today were existing in 1920 in Romania. It's a very important fact. Yes. So if you don't have any comments, I still want to make another comment. We have among us people who are non-literary people, not people from the humanities, and yet they are interested in culture. Even the person who asked the question, Alexander Deman from Munich, he's a computer scientist, analyst, Professor Alexandru Carausciu, who is from Iași and is with us, and he's a mathematician. Maria Bleiberg, who is in Los Angeles, and she's not at all in the humanities. She was a professor of computer science, artificial intelligence in Kansas. And I know that through Carausciu, who has this cultural, literary or cultural club called Estina in Montreal, is an engineer. So look at people who are not in the humanities and who came to this session. And I think it's good that we spread the word about literature and the importance of Papadat Bengescu among foreigners, among ourselves, and among people who are not in the humanities.
I would like to say something, Ilana. When is the time? When I can say something?
Please. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay. First of all, I would really like to appreciate all the speakers. It's absolutely amazing what we learned today. And want to thank you to Ilana Orlich and to Madalina and to all the other ones. But I want to say something. I read in Romanian Concert de Musică de Bach, and I was so keen to attend this symposium. Also, I have another one in parallel going right now that I'm part of it. And I think was printed around 70, that book in Romania. I'm not sure, I have it at home. But you said, I don't know when she was, approved to be.
Yeah. Yes. So you are going to make it difficult for me to acknowledge my age, but I just wanted you to know that I left Romania in the early 70s.
Oh, I see.
So that's number one. And then another thing that I want to say, and I know you all must go, and I must go too. I actually have to be somewhere else, but it's such a pleasure to be here. I want to add something very important, which I did not say, and maybe you already know it. But the concert of Bach music is actually a Romana clay. And in Marcian, she actually meant George Enescu. And Elena Drăgănescu, of course, was Maruca Cantacuzino.
I have to read again with a different
type. So, I mean, there are a lot of elements in the story, including the beautiful house, the Enescu Museum. Yeah. So Enescu had this incredible marriage to Maruca Cantacuzino, and it's quite fascinating to know about the background. And I think that Papadat Bengescu encapsulates it in the story, which is another reason why the book was sort of taken out of the picture, because then you would have had to talk about Maruca Cantacuzino and all of that Belle Epoque, which was so splendid in Romania before communism destroyed it. Let's face it, that's the truth. So, okay, sorry about making this over time.
Very nice.
I just want to show you, this is Concert de Musică de Bach, published in 1963. That was the first time after, being cancelled, that she was again talked about, and her novel was published, 1963. And that's the book.
Very useful, Professor Modure, just like you were mentioning of Călinescu's words about Papadat Bengescu. With all due respect to Călinescu, that's sort of unforgivable, no? So,
I fully agree.
I have a challenging question for you presenters. Can some of you say what did you learn today from the other presentations?
From the presenters? Well, I can tell you that I'm very impressed as always. The students are my world. I'm so impressed with Shannon's presentation. I think she's a formidable scholar. And I think that while we have Sean Cotter as an incredible translator, who is obviously American, no ancestry connected to Romania there, we do have Shannon as a young scholar. And of course there is Madalina, but of course she's one of us. But with Shannon, I am just so grateful for this incredible profession, which is that of being a teacher, because what more could one do than make possible, open the way, open the door to this incredibly talented people. That's what I learned today, that being a teacher is a great call.
I think we should congratulate Madalina also, because she took an area of the writings of Papadat Bengescu, and she did a very good job at going into the details. So I admire both the young generation as well as all of us. So it is wonderful. But you know what I propose, with your permission, Madalina and Ilana, if you want, we can have 7 minutes or 10 minutes of open conversation, turn all our mics on, and then stop. Are you against or for this?
I have to go, so even though this is,
so I just stop now. You decide. You are the main organizer, and I thank you all. In what I'm concerned, the session is over, and what we can, if you agree, and then whoever wants to stay, we can have a conversation among us, and whoever has to go is welcome to go, because the session already was longer than expected, but it was impressive, I think.
I want to have an invitation for a next, a follow-up. Eventually, Ilana, you can propose another subject, or this subject to be developed was very, very interesting. And I think it's good for all of us to have such kind of meetings.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Madalina, once again. Incredible work. We owe you everything in that regard, Madalina. Thank you very much, and a happy weekend to everyone. Thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah. Bye. Goodbye. Madalina, can you stay, or is it possible for you to stay? So then let's stay as long. So feel free to leave whenever. Just say goodbye and leave. The captain has to stay until the ship sinks.
That's
so we will stay. But now we consider the session over, but we don't turn the recording off, because maybe you would like to listen to yourself, and I'll send you the talk. So you can all turn the mics on, and let's have a kind of a discussion among ourselves. If you have anything that you want to say, go for it. And then 10 minutes, Madalina. Let's say after 10 minutes, no matter what, we stop. Okay?
I'm so sorry, I need to leave, but I hope, Ilana, you'll send me the registration.
Thank you, Anna, for party. By the way, I made a little mistake there. You are also an engineer interested in culture. I only mentioned
I was always.
Anna is also an engineer, chemical engineer, and very active in the chemical society, but interested in culture. Okay, thank you for joining us, Anna. And again, anyone who wants to leave, don't feel shy.
I want to say hello to and goodbye to Doina and to Viorica, my friends. Viorica Kokhar, she is from Germany. Doina is from United States. And I really appreciate they attending. And they are still here.
Thank you. You have a beautiful background. Okay. The Athenaeum that Ilana already showed is behind you. A gorgeous building.
Both of them, Doina and Viorica, they are chemical engineers. Okay, but very interested in culture. Bye-bye to everybody. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you bringing Doina and Viorica. Thank you, Doina and Viorica, for attending.
So if I may come back to your question, Ilana, and that's regarding what we have learned from this. Well, so many things. First of all, I had no idea that Hortensia Papadat Bengescu had been translated in so many other languages, but not enough, in my opinion, right? And then what I wanted to say is that I had a tremendous fun watching pictures with Professor Orlich and figuring out what pictures we want to add to that particular presentation. So I saw so much of the old Bucharest, and it's just amazing. So even that kind of looking at the city and thinking about the city and talking about the city with Professor Orlich was incredible. And then I particularly enjoyed Shannon's melding together of French and Romanian culture, cultural critique, and looking at the ways in which she was able to do that. So that was fantastic. So this would be a very brief précis.
Actually, I have an answer to that question as well. It was really interesting to be among so many Romanians who knew Papadat Bengescu, but also who didn't. I work mostly with obscure female authors of the Belle Epoque in France and also in Germany. So I work a lot with Rachid and Colette, as well as Amgad Coyne. And I've never, like before, a few years ago, I hadn't read much Romanian literature. And actually, Papafat-Bengescu was my first foray into women's literature in Romania. So I just want to say I learned so much context through Professor Orlich. I also didn't know that it had been translated as often as it had in other European languages. And Madalena's presentation took my breath away. I thought it was amazingly done because this medicalized women's history with medicalized theory, as well as their experiences within the medical field, I feel like is undertaught. And it's fascinating to see the way that Papadat-Bengescu discusses that phenomenon, even all the way back in the 1920s. So I feel very grateful to just be around so many people who are so knowledgeable. So thank you.
Yes, Maria.
Yes, you know, I am very interested in to read some of her works, and during presentations, I Google it to find a book. It's impossible. How do I get a book to read? I like to read it in Romanian. I like to read it in any language, but it's impossible. If I Google her, I get all kinds of I don't know what kind of food or something. And I will appreciate if someone will give me an idea how to get one of her books to read, because yes, when I was educated, I didn't hear about her. We didn't hear about her at all.
Would you mind sending me an email so we can see how we can sort this out?
Oh, thank you very much. Yes, I will.
Should I put again my email in the chat? I'll place it here.
How do I get your email?
Alexandru?
It is here in the
just trying to help Maria with a hint. Maria, if you go on Wikipedia and enter Hortensia Papadat Bengescu, you will find a list with all her novels and writings and
I did already, but I like to get them, to read some of them. Yes, I got the whole list. Yes, I went to Wikipedia.
I'm going to pipe in a little bit here, Maria and everybody else. University of Georgia in Athens. This is in the state of Georgia here in the United States. I don't know the exact number, but has quite a few of her books in Romanian.
Yeah,
somebody donated them to the library. That's how I read some of her books in the US. So if you go on WorldCat, maybe somebody knows how to do that. WorldCat, it's one word. And put her, she has a hyphenated name, but that shouldn't be an issue. Put her last name in there, it should come there. Maybe Madalena and I can help you later with that.
That's why I was saying that we can sort this out later. But thank you so much, Anka. And by the way, it's such a pleasure to see you here. Thank you so much.
All of you. I'm a German, Romanian.
Melania, do you want to say something? Melania? You are unmuted. Unmute yourself. Unmute yourself if you want to say something. Okay, and if not, last but not least, I want Alexandru Cetățeanu to tell you what I meant by Sadoveanu being a topic that he was very pleased about when Milana Orlich mentioned it. If you can make a brief summary of it.
Yes, indeed. Indeed, we got the idea at our literary meeting, Destine Literary Destinies, to do something as a court, international court, to judge the communists and especially the writers who were traitors, who were collaborators with Bolsheviks and with the Communist Party at the beginning. Our idea was the people who attended the meeting on Zoom to be like jurors, to to vote yes, guilty or not guilty. And indeed, Sadoveanu was declared a traitor and guilty of cooperation with the enemies of the country. And of course, with those communists at the beginning, where there's so many crimes. One of the crimes was this, Hortensia Papadat Bengescu was such a great writer, and she died in misery because Sadovano, the vice president of the people, I don't know how they call it, didn't accept to be helped. And we'll do that with more writers, that because there's a crisis in Romania of personalities, of there's a crisis of good characters. And the message we want to send out is that we should be very careful about characters. We send a message that you should not be a cooperator with the enemies of the country, and just to have a good life like Sadovano did. Yeah, it was a good idea. I had so many people who replied that I am the bad guy doing this. How come I touch the great Sadovano? I was very clear. We appreciate his work before 1944, but we cannot appreciate his work saying that the light is coming from the east. After he met Stalin, he was visiting Moscow, and Mitra Kokor, the other bad country, the bad book, propaganda book for red cultism. And yeah, that was funny, a good experience, and we'll have a book. We'll publish a book about this subject.
Thank you, Alexandru.
Congratulations, Professor Ileana Costa. It was a big event. I am so excited. It was so nice to attend this. Congratulations.
Thank you. You know, one of the things that I thank you very much. You know, people here don't know about these things. And one thing that I would like all of you in the humanities and interested in Romanian culture, let us know about events. Like I let Madalina know about these cultural events on Zoom. There are things that you don't find out, and it's a shame. Like, for instance, both Alexandru Cetățeanu and I attended this Cioran colloquium. Any one of you who knew about the existence of the annual colloquium for Cioran in his birthplace? No, because the information doesn't travel well. So I think that one of the things that we should do is whenever we know about an event, just announce the other. And if they are not interested, they raise email. But telling other people about what's going on, and it's very interesting. This Cioran, for instance, conference was extremely, extremely interesting. There was a report I'm going to send to all of you. There is a report of the meeting in details, and I also wrote a little article about the event, and it's not known, and it was just beautiful. They kind of explain, scientists like here, researchers, people studying Cioran and understanding Cioran, made me understand. It was a revelation, because, you know, generally people think about Cioran as being a difficult read, right? And I understood very little. I'm not a philosopher, so I don't understand that much. But this Cioran colloquium, I understood Cioran for the first time in my life. So please, all of you, think about sharing. When you have information about cultural events, share it with everybody else. Yes.
By the way, about Cioran, I'm in London. I was looking for, I went to a library to find a book by Cioran, any book, nothing. I was in the bookstore, nothing about Cioran. But I found, as I mentioned at the colloquium, I found a book, Women by Mihail Sebastian, translated in English in 2019 and published in the United States, and in 2020 published in England. And, our culture is still present not everything, but Mihail Sebastian was translated only 2 years ago. This book, I mean.
I guess it takes some people to take initiative because even Choran is not very well known among foreigners. Choran is extremely known by intellectuals, high level of intellectuals in France. And I, at the colloquium, a Choran colloquium, I said, I'm impressed that each time you go and visit an exhibition on anything, on any subject in Paris, you find a quote by Choran. And I went and visited an exhibition of a big fair, as a matter of fact, of interior decoration in Paris at Grand Palais in the center of the city. And there was a long ramp. And on this long ramp, there was a board with a long quote from Choran. So French people really know at that level, of course, at that level of high intellectuality, because he was a member of the French Academy. That's a very difficult institution to penetrate even by French people. So he was a member of the French Academy. It is told by French people that he wrote better in French than the best writers, French writers. And look at that. In the United States, very few people know about Choran. Even in France, at the popular level, he's not known. So we, when I say we, is we Romanians who want to do something for our culture. We should do anything we can to promote these things. And one of the first things we can do immediately is let ourselves know about any events that take place and let the Americans know. I'll tell you from my opinion of the culture, Romanian culture in America. Andrei Codrescu is one of the people who is the best known. Why? Because he had a show on the radio. He had a show on the National Public Radio, so people heard him, so he was known. Then there is Norman Mana, who wrote very badly about Eliade, for instance, in the Chicago Tribune. So there are very few people who are well known. Even Petru Popescu is not very well known in America. Some people know about him, but he's not very well known. Alexander and Maria, did you want to say something? We have to wrap it up.
What I wanted to say is that ARA is a good platform for showing all these events.
Yes, correct. I'm trying. That's
what I want to say.
I have to have the list of all the people, so I'm trying. And Alexandru Cetățanu helped me, like I'm spreading this. I'm sending this to him. I'm sending the information to another cultural group, literary group called Mircea Eliade in Denver. So I'm trying my best. But I think, as a goal, we have to let our culture be known by non-Romanians.
I like to say that Alexander Denman wants to say something for a long time, and it's the hand up.
Alexander?
Yes, thank you so much. I fully agree, Nunuș. Sorry, Ileana, I'm her cousin, so that's why I can't name her Professor Costa. It's ridiculous for me. Okay, good. So I fully agree that we have to promote it, that we have to do some more branding, some more marketing for the Romanian literature. At the same time, you have mentioned something very important for me. It is an intellectual challenge. So let me put it like this: my vision would be, for example, in 5 years to have 5 million Romanian familiar with the novels of Hortensia Papadat Bengescu. So how do we reach a larger mass? Because in this case, let's be honest with us. We are very privileged, we are intellectual, we are doctors, we are professors, there's plenty of people that have visited the college. But how do we explain, for example, Sionia, permit me to challenge myself by using your presentation. Your presentation was extremely intellectual. It took all my energy to follow you, to follow on Unheimlich and Heimlich, on the Sigmund Freud and everything I know about it. But how do you explain this to a blue collar who doesn't have the education of a college, not even of a high school? So I think we should challenge ourselves and say, if I want to explain years old boy or girl in the school. How can I put this in words that are understandable for a large mass of people? This group is very concentrated on this privileged academic circle. But if we want to get some more branding, we have to put something which is the German call it populärwissenschaftlich, so scientific popular. Doesn't mean that it has to downgrade the level of the conversation, but it has to be understandable. And believe me, in science and in artificial intelligence and in Industry 4.0, where I'm active, it took me 4 to 5 years to explain different difficult, complex, technical, let's say, subjects in a very, very simple language. And the simple language that people understand is the added value. What is the added value for a blue collar in Romania, in US, in Germany, to have something from Hortensia Papadat Bengescu, by the way, a fantastic woman, emancipated, and so on. Alexandru, we are the two males in this last session. So I take advantage because we are two emancipated men, and today is the International Men's Day. So that's why I'm talking a little bit more than usual. But I want to bring this thought in this group. It's worth to be the branding to be published, to be marketed with a larger audience than only academicians, college people.
Absolutely true. Thank you. You gave me an idea, by the way, Alexander. You gave me an idea. We should have, maybe you all know about TED Talks. These are talks where someone who is deeply into a field, a scientist, comes and for 18 minutes, that's the limit, 18 minutes, he explains the concepts so that everybody who is outside of his field can understand. Well, I personally believe that the Cioran, for instance, colloquium was rather understandable, that today's talk were rather understandable. But you gave me an idea, Alexander. What about having an ARA session where we take a few Romanian topics and we make TED Talks about that topic? That means Cioran explained to the, the dumb people who don't know about Cioran. Hortensia Papadat Bengescu explained to the dumb people who don't know about her, so that you don't use very scientific terms and you talk to the population. For one moment, oh, they disappeared. I wanted to introduce to you somebody else. Well, I think that we should wrap up, though, unless anybody else has something to say.
Well, I wanted to answer something to
Sure, go ahead.
If I can just 2 minutes and then I will be done. So yes, that's actually one of my goals, not to only write in an academic language, but to write and present in more accessible language. So the presentation that you heard today, I would not present that at the Medical Humanities Conference where I'm going. This presentation was tailored for an educated audience, right? But an educated audience that doesn't really, that's not conversant with that particular vocabulary, and also not conversant with vocabulary in literary studies, so sort of a general kind of, but there's a way to make this palatable also to audiences that are not very well educated. So yes, I'm all there with you, and I think that's really important, and I think that should be a really important goal for all academics, to make our work accessible for people who are not in our little enclave. So thank you so much for bringing that. And I really hope that the TED Talks of Romanian authors will somehow come into being. And if that happens, please do let me know, Ilana. And since I have the so-called virtual microphone right now, could we just please have a big round of applause for Ilana, who actually has been the soul of this particular session. And thank you so much for bringing Romanian authors and Romanian important persons to larger audiences. This is an incredibly important kind of work that you're doing. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you. One thing, Alexander, what he mentioned is something also that raised my attention, is a book for children. You know how you go to a museum and you have a guide through the museum for children? I think that someone should say, let's have Romanian values for children and explain those values with pictures, with little diagrams, so that children would know what it is. Very good ideas. Well, thank you very much. Thank you all. Thank you for it. Maria, you want to still say something?
Yeah, I want to ask you, what's next?
What?
What will be next? What will be the next presentation, right?
Well, the next
we are getting used to have one.
The next presentation is not going to be a presentation because December comes. And in December, what we are going to do, it's a first for me, the children from musical schools, the young people, young musicians from schools of music in Iași have done concerts for ARA, both in Iași, on the spot because there was the pandemic, and at UCLA, a digital concert. So the woman who has coordinated these concerts, her name is Nina Munteanu. Some of you who attended other sessions might have heard her playing the violin. She is a violinist and a professor of music. And she wrote to me about a girl who is a young woman who is very sick with cancer and needs to get some help with money. So we are going to try to raise money. It's the first time in my life that I'll do that via selling for very few bucks a concert, a digital concert by the musicians in Iași, and say whoever wants to make a donation can make a donation. And this way we'll have for December a concert, a digital concert for all the ARA members and friends of the young musicians in Iași, and they are wonderful. And next year, Bogdan Suceava, who wrote to me that he would like to have a Sean Cotter session, the translator of Crai de Curte Veche. I don't know if we are going to find, because you have to find the people who are really interested. You know, I believe as a manager, I believe in assigning tasks only that people really like to do, because then they perform well. So in this case, Ilana Ulrich and Madalina, they were in love with Hortensia Papadat Bengescu. They knew about it, so I let them go for the subject. When I did the Astro-Romanian session, Ionuț Jana was interested in that. He's working on a project on that, so I let him do it. So you have to let people do what they like and what they know well about. Now we have to find somebody, if we want to do Crai de Curte Veche translator session, we have to find somebody who is interested in this subject and help me, because, you know, I don't know about all these things. I'm just learning with you all. So to answer your question, Maria, I don't know yet, apart from the concert. So expect from us a concert of the young musicians from Iași. And for next year, we will see. If you have suggestions, go ahead, but the suggestions should be not just the topic, but give me the people who are interested in the topic. Alexander, did you want to still say something?
No, I just wanted to say that's the advantage of being in Europe. It's later than 8 o'clock, so I'm enjoying it.
Okay, cheers, cheers. Look, I have a red wine from night. Oh my God, cheers to all of you.
I was born in Dragășan.
Yeah, Dragășan, a gorgeous wine region.
Oh, it's a German wine. We're making progress. We're becoming better and better. Even white wines were better than French and Italians. And we're catching up.
Madalina and all of you, I think you appreciate the fact that this conversation after the session are interesting, because people open up with
always. I know. Yeah.
I hope you didn't think I'm terrible to do this to you all.
Oh no, why? This is wonderful.
I have a spontaneous feeling after our conversation here in this small group. Probably all of you have heard. All of you have heard about Mihai Eminescu. I remember Mihai Eminescu, the first poem I have heard recited by my parents. fascinating. And 200 years later, now I find him as fascinating as that. When I say it should be simple and understandable for everyone, means it can be absolutely fabulous in the quality. It doesn't have to downgrade the quality. But Eminescu is for me an example of a masterpiece of how he plays with the language. Simple like that. It's just a feeling, a spontaneous feeling.
You are not the only one to be impressed. So is Ioan Miclău, who wrote a poem. He started a library in Australia with Romanian books called Mihai Eminescu. He started a journal, a magazine called Iosif Vulcan, because Iosif Vulcan had a relationship. I don't know. He's one of the.
Thank you very much.
What's that?
Yeah, I would like to introduce to you Melania Rusu Carajoiu, our colleague from Montreal. She's the vice president of North American Writers. She's very active in our activities. She wrote 30 books, I guess, some of them for children, poetry, and she's a very, very loved person in Montreal. Melania Rusu Carajoiu.
Da, din Montreal, salut această conferință. Sunt impresionată de volumul cunoștințelor care s-au adăugat prin cercetare în cinstea Hortensiei Papadat Bengescu. Vă mulțumesc tuturor, îmi exprim multă admirație pentru ilustra Hortensia Papadat Bengescu și pentru eruditele persoane care au evocat tot ce se poate spune mai minunat despre această personalitate a României. Vă mulțumesc mult. Thank you very much.
Ok. Da. Invităm pe 11 decembrie la Cenaclul Destine Literare.
So, Alexandru, o să-i trimiți lui Melania invitația și ea o să trimite la toți cei care au participat astăzi.
Absolut. Mulțumesc, mulțumesc.
Mulțumim.
La revedere, trebuie să oprim la un moment dat, că e prea greu pentru unii să stea pe scaun atâta vreme. Vă doresc sănătate și ție, Mădălina, să ieși din această gripă și tuturor și numai bine și vă rog, țineți-ne la curent tot timpul cu tot ce aflați și credeți că este interesant. Mulțumesc, doamna Caragiu, ați făcut o încheiere foarte frumoasă, un sumar de încheiere foarte frumos. Toate bune și pe curând!
Vă mulțumesc!
La revedere!
La revedere!
Bye! Bye.